If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another album review for you guys. And today I'm talking about, probably for me, my personal most anticipated album for the month of January, and one of my most anticipated albums of the year. It's the 11th studio offering from my boys from Norway, the kings of death metal in Norway, Blood Red Throne with NONAGON. Like I said, this is their 11th studio album and their first one on Soul Cellar Records, after being on Nuclear Blast for their last album, Imperial Congregation. Thankfully, after talking with a few of the guys in the band, they told me that what happened was management shift at Nuclear Blast dropped them from the label, which is unfortunate because I would have thought Nuclear Blast would have taken this band to even higher levels, but maybe they still might, just under a smaller label, and maybe they can go back to a bigger label in the future. But anyways, so yeah, this is their first one on Soul Cellar, and also this is their first album since, I would say, if I recall, Brutalitarian Regime was the last one before Yngwie Christensen, otherwise known as Bolt, took over as frontman, starting on the self-titled. He left, Bolt left the band sometime around mid to late 2023, so in his place is frontman Sindre Johnson, who is actually a talented guitarist and bassist. This is also the second full-length with my pal Stian Gunnar Gunderson, who, pray for that man because he unfortunately was diagnosed with leukemia back in October, and he's not playing live for the band right now. In fact, Sindre is doing live bass for him, so Gunner's still in the band and praying and rooting for you to kick leukemia's ass. But let's talk about the album itself. So this album, I had some expectations for this. After all, it is another Blood Red Throne album, and Blood Red Throne have a very nice formula all about writing some great meat and potatoes, old school death metal, very much from the Florida scene for the most part. That's like the main wheelhouse of influence you get from this band. Like immediately bands like Cannibal Corpse and Deicide, but a couple of other European bands will occasionally get in some influence here and there, like I would say Bloodbath and Decapitated in particular. And this album almost feels like the more gritty and raw sequel to Imperial Congregation, which I did review that album when it came out in late 2021, and that was a fantastic album. It was my number 4 ranked BRT album in my Blood Red Throne ranking video I did a little over a year ago, like 15 months ago. But here we are with a brand new album. So like I said, immediately, the production, it's a little more raw and a little more gritty, but it's still well produced and a great mix. And in fact, they got Ronnie Bjornstrom, who's actually a current guitarist for the thrash band from Sweden, Mesro. He actually does the mixing and mastering on this album and also did it for Imperial Congregation. And while there are some similar techniques going on here production-wise, although it sounds more raw and a little bit more gritty, but still sounds clear as day. As far as the songs go, now, like I said, Blood Red Throne's formula has always been about that meat and potatoes, good, fun, old-school death metal. Very much lots of triplet chugs, some thrashy nods, very much, again, like classic Florida death metal, where it was all about triplet chugs and some of that thrash metal influence coming in. But I would say on this album, you get some other new wrinkles, some new ingredients into the Blood Red Throne recipe. I would say there's a little bit more doom elements going on here. There's a little, about maybe 8 to 9% of doom on here. And then also you got more double time stuff going on here. Kicking things off with Epitaph Inscribed, you get this like really eerie dark melody, and that's another thing too. I would say this album is one of their darker albums they've done. I mean, I could almost put this on par in terms of the darkness to an album like Altered Genesis, for example, because that was a pretty dark Blood Red Throne album. This is almost on that same level of darkness, because these melodies that start off Epitaph Inscribed, very dark, very moody, very eerie. And then it just dooms along, and then you get these huge guttural vocals. Like, I will probably say this right now, I think in terms of the more guttural vocals, like the low, putrid gutturals, Sindre might be the strongest guttural vocalist that they've had. Also, his screams, which come up from time to time, very strong. No disrespect to my man Bolt, he's a fantastic death metal vocalist in his own right, but I do think Sindre, when it comes to the low gutturals and the screams, comes off a little bit more clear, I would say, and a little more powerful and a little more pronounced. And after this, once this guttural's going on, you get these, like, doomy marching riffs, almost like a Death Doom song. It starts off, and then triplet chug heaven. I mean, just give me all the triplet chugs I could want. And it was fantastic. And then you get some more brutal riffs that very much remind me of Suffocation. Tremolo riffs that just absolutely destroy your ears in the best way possible. And then another thing that kind of comes up across the board on this album is more atmosphere. And Blood Red Throne is not a band I would associate with having a whole lot of atmosphere, but you're getting more atmosphere on this album, and this track certainly showcases it. Now, the following three tracks, Ode to the Obscene, Seeking the Pierce, and Tempest Sculptor, yeah, there's some more D-beat stomps going on to kind of give it a little bit of like a punky feel, almost like Symphonies of Sickness era Carcass to some extent, especially on Ode to the Obscene. The D-beat stomp there definitely feels like something you would have heard from old school Carcass. But also, this is where the double time stuff comes in to really kind of bring out almost like a bolt thrower influence. Like, there's some more nods, I would say, to like bolt thrower on this album when it comes down to some of these double time riffs and rhythms that are going on. But you get these amazing dark harmonized melodic riffs at the beginning with that double time section. And of course, one of the big standout things about this album is Gunner's bass work. I was a big fan of his bass work on Imperial Congregation. He continues to flourish, and he's still so young. After all, he's younger than me, for crying out loud. And he's still showing that he's probably one of the best upcoming bassists in not just death metal, but in all of metal. I'm going to give him credit where it's due. Like, he is just delivering on his bass chops. And I also love how they off-time the riff here on Ode to the Obscene, and it ends on this, like, very mysterious melody. Now, Seeking the Pierce starts off with some more Cannibal Corpse-style riffs before you get back into D-beat stomps and big screams, and then it gets doomy again. And even the bass manages to find its own voice during the doomy sections. And I love the lead on this track, and of course the lead work on this album. Both Dodd and Meathook, great guitarists, great riff writers, and guys that can shred. The leads on this album kind of go all over the map, from great harmonies to dive bombs, shred, and just tasteful melody. Now, Tempest Sculptor, this is one of the catchiest songs of the entire album. That opening riff, they kind of take that riff on different walks, whether it be more in a groove sense, or they even kind of put on some fast blasting on top, or just do it in flat-out double time. Like, you get this riff quite a bit on this track, but they change it up in terms of the rhythm. Of course, it even gets a little bit thrashy and, dare I say, almost tech death at times whenever it gets, like, really fast and riff-driven. And, of course, it gets doomy again towards the end. Now, Every Silent Plea, this was an interesting one, because this was essentially a new lyric and new title to a song they released early last year called Latrodectus, when Bolt was the frontman. So this is very much the songwriting, it's the same, just the title and the lyrics are different, but it's great double bass galore on here, but with some like nasty, almost Morbid Angel tremolo riffs going on, but a big, catchy, almost slam breakdown. And you even get slam breakdowns later on the song Split Tongue Sermon, where you get these more brutal, slammy breakdowns. Nonagon, the title track, triplet chug perfection. Like, this song is all about the triplet chugs, but they vary them up. Like, they'll either add some blasts to it, some tremolo riffs, or just some straight up catchiness. Like, the way it starts off with these nasty tremolo riffs brings back that Morbid Angel vibe, but then whenever they get a bit more technical and throwing in some blasts, makes me think of Decapitated, but when it gets into the more catchiness of the triplet chug, Cannibal Corpse and Deicide immediately come to mind. But I also love how, as the song goes along, it gets a little more melodic, almost like a At the Gates track to some degree. Split Tongue Sermon, this and the following track, Blade Eulogy, is really where you get more of that thrashiness coming out of Blood Red Throne on this album. With Split Tongue Sermon, it's thrashy riffs, but with like double time rhythms, again, similar to Bolt Thrower. And then you get this cool tremolo riff and blast thrashy beat, almost like recent Cannibal Corpse, almost like a B-side from Violence Unimagined or Chaos Horrific. More slam breakdowns, like I said, and there's even a cool spoken word and subdued atmospheric melody that comes in towards the end. Blade Eulogy, still very much thrashy all throughout. Shredding dive bombs almost gives it like that Slayer vibe. Solid grooves, and then there's even some like black metal tremolos that come up here, which kind of takes you back a little bit to the early days of Blood Red Throne, where they incorporate a little bit of black metal in their sound. And then the lead on this track might have been one of the best leads that I've heard in a while from this band. Almost felt like old school In Flames, back when In Flames was actually In Flames in the 90s and early 2000s. And then we get to the final track, Fleshrend, which is nearly 7 minutes, and this has been becoming a pretty cool trope. They always end the albums now, pretty much I would say almost ever since, well, at the very least, the self-titled, where they end off with their longest track, and this one being almost 7 minutes. And this track goes into all sorts of directions. Big tremolo groove, almost like Bloodbath. Then you get some brief triplet chugs with hammer blasts, and I love, again, the bass taking hold. Then you get this like really cool like galloping double bass pattern, but with like more doomy riffs once again. And then double time doom, almost like Gatecreeper, I would even say. But the lead on here was probably the biggest standout in terms of the solos. Harmonized, wonderfully tasty. Can't go wrong. And then you get the more proper triplet chugs, but then they even throw in some odd time to that triplet chug to give it an almost progressive feel. And then it gets thrashy, amazing drum fills. Freddie does a great job. Yeah, he's very much meat and potatoes when it comes to drumming, but he's able to throw in some nice flair, especially with the turnovers and fills on this track, but the bass also playing along with that. Now, as far as any complaints, the ending of Fleshrend was maybe a little bit too abrupt. I would have loved it to have heard like a big crescendo to end the song and the album with like maybe a big nasty melody and then end off on a big bang. I think that would have really, really helped end this album off better. And then, of course, maybe some of the arrangements of the track listing could have been switched up, like having Obscene to the, or Ode to the Obscene, Seeking to Pierce, Tempest Sculptor, with all those having like, what am I trying to say? D-beat stomps. And then you have also Split Tongue Sermon and Blade Eulogy back-to-back being more thrashy tracks. I think if you had put those two songs in between, I would say, like, put Split Tongue Sermon in between Ode to the Obscene and Seeking to Pierce, and Blade Eulogy in between Seeking to Pierce and Tempest Sculptor, and I think it would have made this album maybe flow a little bit better. But every song fucking ripped on here, so apart from that minor nitpick, and of course the slightly abrupt ending of the album and the last track, this is another excellent offering from these masters of meat and potatoes, old school death metal from Norway. Call me biased, again, because I'm a big fan of this band, but I legit think they're really starting to explore a little bit more. And yeah, this is a longer review because this is one of my favorite modern death metal bands, so I am going to go out on a limb and give this one a 4.5 out of 5. Now, is it better than Imperial Congregation? I would say it's on par with Imperial Congregation, but still, fantastic album for me, and actually the day I'm reviewing this, which is Thursday night, they streamed the album on Soul Seller, and I already pre-ordered the album, so it'll be here pretty soon, and it will be featured in the next collection update. But yeah, 4.5 out of 5, all day long, all day strong. But of course, that's just my opinion. What did you guys think of NONAGON by BRT, Blood Red Throne? Let me know in the comments below, and once again, to Gunner, the bassist, please get well soon. I don't know what I would do if we lost you, but I think you're going to kick leukemia's ass and continue to slay on bass. And of course, to the other guys, Sindre, Dodd, Hook, Freddy, keep it brutal. But until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.